Hi, it's Mark from Top Local Lead Generation. We're here with Mr. Paul Toffoli. He's an award-winning realtor, voted by his clients as the best realtor in Vancouver. And we're going to talk about closing today. How are you doing today, Paul?
I'm really well, Mark. Thank you very much.
So, closing, lawyers, notaries, all that stuff.
Yeah, this is when all the hard work and all of the stress and anxiety of going through the home search or the stress of selling your home and having to keep it clean all the time and having all those people traipsing through your home. This is when it all pays off. This is when, oh my God, we have a new home. Whether you're selling or buying, it's the day of having a new home. So really, it's a very straightforward process. It can be very stressful. So just because you're moving, one of the most stressful things in life, I think, is what they say is moving from one home to another. So it's the more prepared you can be, both physically and emotionally, the better off you're going to be. So let's just talk about what the process is from a legal perspective, from the paperwork perspective, and then we can talk about some of the other ins and outs of moving. So I didn't mean that as a pun. Um, Legally, you've gone through this contract process. You've negotiated your contract with the help of your realtors. So you've gone through your subject removal. You've had your inspection. You've done all those types of things. At the time of subject removal, you would have paid a deposit into the realtor's trust account. Typically, it's the buyer's agent's trust account, and that's held in trust just towards the closing of the sale. About, in the last week before the sale, the buyer will go into their notary or lawyer's office. The seller will go into their lawyer or notary's office and sign the land title transfer documents. The buyer will sign the mortgage documents, and we'll go through that whole process. It's fairly straightforward, but basically before the buyer goes in, the notary will say, this is the amount of a deposit or a bank draft that you need to bring in. So basically the way the funds work is we have the purchase price. Say it's $300,000. You've paid a deposit of $15,000. You're putting 20% down. There's other fees that come out of that, including the lawyer's fees. There may be some other items that need to be adjusted for, like property taxes, etc. The buyer's notary, will prepare a statement of adjustments that takes all those things into account. The seller's lawyer, notary, will look at those items, confirm that there'll be agreement. A few days before completion, the buyer goes in, goes through all those documents, signs the mortgage documents. The lawyer will send a request to the company, to the real estate company, holding that deposit, and request that those deposit funds be transferred and give them direction as to where any excess funds would go, how commissions are supposed to be paid, and so forth. So that money gets transferred to the buyer's lawyer. On the completion day, the buyer's lawyer will then send a request to the bank or the mortgage company for the balance of funds that are being lent. Those funds get combined. There will also be a check, typically the balance of the deposit, that would be brought in by the buyer at the time they sell. All those funds are combined. Once the right amount is there, the notary or lawyer, the buyer's lawyer or notary, will transfer those funds to the seller's lawyer or notary, who will then pay off the mortgage that's sitting on the title, and any excess funds, in addition to any outstanding strata fees, mortgage, etc., will then be paid out to the seller. Okay, the seller will then do what they want. If they're buying another property, they may transfer some of those funds to another property. They may put them in their bank account. Whatever they decide to do, that's up to the seller, because that's their money at this point in time. Things that sometimes stress people out is, oh, how do we adjust for property taxes? How do we adjust for strata fees? I've got to transfer the electricity into my name. I've got to call BC Hydro. I've got to call TELUS. I've got to call the gas company. All those things. So those are all minor steps that you can take care of well ahead of time. but the statement of adjustments will be prepared by the lawyers. We'll have all of the financial accounting dealt with, and you just need to go through it. Take your time and go through it. Make sure that the lawyer or notary explains it to you. If you've got any questions, make sure they're answered so you've got a real comfort level. And then once that's done, once the buyer's agent notifies the seller's agent that buyer's lawyer notifies the seller's lawyer that those funds have been gathered and are on the courier or ready to be picked up by courier, then permission will be given to transfer the title at land titles. And that's really the key moment, and that happens on completion date. As soon as that title is registered at land title as having been transferred, the previous mortgage is being paid off, all those things are dealt with, then the buyer becomes the new owner. Now, does that mean they're walking in that day and moving into their new home? No, because typically completion is the following day or sometimes 2 or 3 days afterwards. It can sometimes be the same day, but it's rare. And that's to make sure that the buyer has received their funds before, sorry, the seller has received their funds before the buyer actually gets the keys. So say the day after, a couple of days after, typically at 12 noon, the buyer is going to get the keys to the property. Those arrangements will be made through the realtors. So the listing agent, the seller's realtor will make arrangements with the buyer's realtor to get the keys. If I'm working for the buyer, I get the keys. I meet the buyer at the property. Typically, we do a walkthrough, make sure everything is as expected, and go from there. Often, in this situation is when you discover that the seller's abilities to clean and the time they had or their expectations of how they have to leave the property are not the same as the buyers hope they would be. And I think we've lost Mark. Are you there again?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Did you catch that last bit?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So I always tell my clients who are buyers to have an expectation that the property may not be as pristine and clean as you hope it will be. Most often, we're pleasantly surprised, and the sellers do an excellent job on cleaning. But it is the one area where, due to people being rushed to get out the door, they're moving to a new home that they're probably going to have to clean up. Sometimes there's some challenges with cleaning. So we just want to be prepared mentally and emotionally that it may not be perfect. And often, sometimes I'll get a phone call. I'll help my clients to connect with cleaners, etc. It's a really exciting day. It's a very stressful day because of the moving and the movers and all those things, but it's a very exciting day.
So what, other than walking into maybe not as clean a home as you'd like, what else can go wrong? Like, what if there's timing issues? What if somebody doesn't get out in time?
Yeah, and this is something that happens very rarely, but occasionally you have a situation where, maybe the seller's mover is late arriving, they've overbooked themselves, or maybe it's a tenanted property and the tenants haven't been able to organize their move as they will. And really that's why you want to have realtors involved, because it can become quite emotional and quite stressful. I'm the buyer. I've just moved out of my previous home. I've got everything in the truck. I pull up to the curb, and I see that the sellers are still moving out. This is where you want to have realtors who are communicating with each other and making sure that it's all clear. Because you know what? If I know the day before, as a buyer, that there might be a problem on the timing, I'm going to talk to my mover. I'm maybe going to talk to the person who's bought the place I'm moving out of, or maybe if it's a rental, the landlord, and say, look, we might have a bit of a hitch. We might have to leave a couple of hours later. How can we work it out? And usually if the realtors are communicating with each other and are doing a good job, you don't have surprises. It happens occasionally, and then it's like, well, maybe I've got some resources. Maybe I've got another moving company that I can refer or bring some extra resources in. But it's going to be a stressful day. You have to be prepared for a few surprises. But the more communication, the more conversation there is between the various parties ahead of time, the more smoothly it'll go.
that's it. That
There you
pretty much
go.
sums up closing. Um, Pretty straightforward process. And if you are, in my experience, if you are well prepared for your move, it's a lot less stress than if you are last minute moving and trying to clean as you backing out the door.
Exactly.
All right, we've been talking with Paul Toffoli. Again, he's a voted best realtor in Vancouver by his clients. You can reach him at toffoli.ca or give him a call, 604-787-6963. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Mark.